I make an adjustment to where Alberto is standing. I say something like, can I get you to stand here side on? I use some light touch to direct as well, so it's a multi-level communication. What I'm looking for here is what I call quality of response. Hey there, how's it going? This is James Tripp with a video for Hypnosis Without Trance going out on James Tripp Chaos Wave on YouTube. This video is actually a segment from a longer piece of content that is available within the new Hypnosis Without Trance online deep apprenticeship. Within my teaching of hypnosis, I do a lot of breaking down of hypnosis routines because there's something that people often miss, and that is that hypnosis is not about scripts, it's not about procedures or formulas or anything like this. So sometimes people see me doing a demo of something and they think that that is a recipe and that if they follow that they should get the result. What they don't recognize is that they are seeing an example of a particular hypnotic facilitation. It could have gone another way if I were getting different responses from the person that I'm working with. This video is sponsored by the Hypnosis Without Trance online deep apprenticeship. If you enroll on this program before midnight on the 8th of March 2020, you get to spend 1 year with me and your fellow travelers learning hypnosis deeply for 2/3 off the regular price. If you want to catch that, you'll find a link around here just about now. So one of the things about Hypnosis Without Trance as an approach to hypnosis and hypnotic facilitation is the recognition that human beings, people you want to work with, people you want to do hypnotic facilitation with, are alive. They are alive, they are unique individuals, they are complex, adaptive neurological systems, they are glorious in a great many ways, and in order to work with those people, you need a degree of craft and skill. So really, in order to make any piece of hypnosis work, you've got to understand what it is you're doing. You've got to have a grasp of the tools that are at your disposal, the communication tools. This is why I like to do a lot of breakdowns. The segment that you're going to see right now is from a much longer tutorial. It's about a 45-minute tutorial. I've pulled out about 10-12 minutes or so here. And we go into a lot of detail, looking at differences that make differences, nuances, psychological subtleties. All of these things count because, as I pointed out, when you're working with another human being, you are working with a complex, adaptive neurological system. You're working with a psychological entity with a sense of self, with their own unique cognitive proclivities and all of these sorts of things. And what you want to do is be able to stack the odds massively in terms of being able to influence that complex system. Okay, and this is all we ever get to do. We do not get to control other human beings when we are doing hypnosis. This idea of mind control is way off beam. We do get to optimize our ability to influence them. And the more you have in your tool kit and understanding set around the kinds of psychological subtleties, the kinds of nuances, the kinds of bits of business that you need to stack the odds, the greater the likelihood of bringing a session to a fruitful and interesting and exciting conclusion. Last thing I'll say before we get into this breakdown, if you want to see the full session without the breakdown, I've put it up on YouTube before, so you'll find a link around about now to where that is, and you can check that out. Okay, let's get into this breakdown. Let me get you to just stand here side on. And you're right-handed, aren't you? Right-handed. I'm going to borrow your right hand here. So we're only a few moments into the process, but already a couple of really important things have happened that you might otherwise miss if we don't flag them. First of all, I make an adjustment to where Alberto is standing. I say something like, can I get you to stand here side on? And I use some light touch to direct as well, so it's a multi-level communication. What I'm looking for here is what I call quality of response. The reason for doing this is to see whether the person I'm working with is going to respond fluidly to my directions and suggestions, or whether they're going to put in some of their own thinking and their own processing. I want an immediate, very fluid response. In this instance, I only do a very small amount of this because I get such a good response from Alberto, I don't need to do any more. Sometimes if I'm not sure, I'll change somebody's position several times, and again, I am paying attention. In Hypnosis Without Trance, paying attention to the nonverbal responses coming from your hypnotic subject, for want of a better word, is an absolutely crucial part of the skill set. We are paying attention to the feedback that's coming back from the client and working with that all the time. The second thing you'll see me do here is a mock evaluation. I say, are you left or right-handed? Now, this is called witch doctoring. In the Hypnosis Without Trance system, this is called witch doctoring. What it is there's no actual inherent meaning in this, but it's a little bit of pantomime that seems meaningful. The way this works psychologically is if you do things that seem meaningful, people unconsciously assume that this thing is for real. They think unconsciously, well, they wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't an important part of the process. So it adds richness, it adds a sense of something really meaningful is going on here. When you put these little bits of witch doctoring into the mix, they can be very, very powerful from the perspective of psychologically levering more buy-in for the process. So do not overlook these little subtle touches. You're right-handed, aren't you? Right-handed. I'm going to borrow your right hand here. Get you to take hold of this with your finger and your thumb. So again, in this short segment, there's a couple of things that I want to highlight. First of all, I say to Alberto, I'm going to borrow your right hand here. And I do this with a full body communication. So I reach for the hand. It's like I'm taking control of the dynamic fully and completely. And I am paying attention once again to Alberto's responses to see that he responds in this fluid way. Notice in this communication that it is a full body communication. It is not just words. I'm working in the tactile channel, I'm working with gesture, I'm looking to create a multi-dimensional communication and engender a high quality response. So next, let's look at some of the languaging that I'm using here. I say to Alberto, I'm going to get you to take hold of this. Now I use that phrase, I'm going to get you to, because it is a lot softer than a direct command of hold this. Okay, hold this is too abrupt. If you go too abrupt, you often get pushback. So I will soften that language to, I'm going to get you to hold this. But notice, even though the language is softened, the tonality is one of absolute certainty, of absolute control. It's like I am absolutely wanting to communicate with everything that I do and say that I know what I'm doing and I am in charge of this process, but without using pushy language. So that's a really important part. Also, I'll point out here, notice how I say, I want you to take hold of this. I emphasize the word hold non-verbally. This is called analog marking in hypnosis, and it's marking that out as a suggestion. He won't have picked that up consciously, but unconsciously it emphasizes the concept hold, because that is what we want to have happen, and especially at the level of unconscious response. Get you to take hold of this with your finger and your thumb, so you can feel your finger. So see here how I step around to take a shared perspective with Alberto on what is happening. This is a really important thing, especially when doing eyes open hypnosis. Some people, they try and eyeball the client too much, and all that does is pulls them out of the reality tunnel that you're leading them into and pulls them into the interpersonal zone. So what's much more useful as the facilitator is to take a shared perspective on wherever you want the action to be happening. Here we're going for a hand stick, so I want to focus in with Alberto. It's me and him together focusing on the same point, and start to direct the attention and direct the action in that place. This is a really hugely important thing. If you're a hypnotic facilitator that does eyes open work, whether that's NLP, formal hypnosis stuff, whatever that might be, really do pay attention to this. I see it all the time, people doing too much eye contact, too much eyeballing. That takes people out of the psychoactive space and into the interpersonal space, which is not the reality that you're looking to pull them into. Get you to take hold of this with your finger and your thumb, so you can feel your finger and thumb really just gripping the card as you. So I really want to focus in on what's going on linguistically in this section, but I will also reference the nonverbals as well. What I've done here is I've invited Alberto to take the card with his finger and thumb. And then as I step around, I say, as you feel your finger and thumb gripping the card. Now, this is a very subtle but important distinction. It's to do with the language of doing versus the language of happening. What we want to create when we're doing hypnosis is an experience of something happening all by itself, not an experience of somebody doing something. So I've moved very quickly from the language of doing, hold the card, to the language of happening as you feel your fingers gripping the card. Okay, this presupposes the fingers are gripping. The fingers as a sort of disembodied entity are not Alberto. If I'd have said, as you feel yourself gripping the card, that would organize reality where the agency was with Alberto. But when I say, as you feel your finger and thumb gripping the card, or as you feel those fingers gripping the card, it's about him experiencing the gripping happening. Okay, so this is the language of happening and not the language of doing. I also want to say something about the choice of descriptive word here. I'm using the word gripping, and I am using it very deliberately and purposefully. I could have said holding, but notice, what's the difference between holding and gripping? What does the word gripping imply that the word holding does not? Essentially, what we've got here is a pace and a lead happening at the same time. In hypnosis, pacing is where your description of reality matches the client's experience that they're currently having. Leading is when you want to start pulling that experience in a different direction. So often you get hypnotic language pacing and leading structures, but this is a pacing and leading word because it matches current experience, but puts a certain spin, a certain charge on it, which starts to pull Alberto in this instance in a different direction towards gripping. So I've chosen the word gripping very deliberately, and I lean into that word again with my non-verbals. You will also notice that I use my non-verbals to emphasize certain things. As I say the word gripping, I give a little squeeze on Alberto's finger. Again, this is stuff not to be picked up by his consciousness. It's to go under the radar. One of the wonderful things about non-verbal communication elements is it's very difficult for the person's critical faculty, which is based on logic and reason and symbols, to pull that apart. So the non-verbal suggestions are really important. You will also notice there's some additional ambiguous touches around the hand, and that is to draw unconscious attention to the area and what's happening in the area. So those non-verbal elements are essential parts of the communication package as well. So you can feel your finger and thumb really just gripping the card as you focus intensely. Focus intensely on that point. As your fingers and thumb grip the card, you focus intensely and they're gripping. So again, there is a lot going on in this short segment, both linguistically and in the nonverbal channels as well. The first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the split that I'm creating here between conscious processing and choice and unconscious response. So I'm continuing to talk about the fingers gripping the card, but I'm inviting Alberto to focus intensely. Okay, now if you look at that, focus intensely is a direct request. Focus intensely, that is in the doing channel. But feel your fingers gripping the card is in the happening channel. The reason I'm doing this split, the reason I'm using this device is because I want to take up the bandwidth of Alberto's conscious processing so that unconsciously he can respond without hindrance coming in from the higher processing and the choice-making functions, so to speak. So that's why this split has been introduced into the languaging at this point. There is another reason for requesting focus. Focus is a really powerful thing. There is an idea from NLP around eye accessing, which some people say has been debunked scientifically. There's actually a problem with the studies. But the basic premise is that when people access their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own concepts, they will move their eyes. You can see this in everyday life. People move their eyes doing something called eye accessing. So in order for somebody to run their own game, so to speak, I want to take people out of their everyday game and into a special game that we're going to play in this moment. I want to take away their eye accessing. So I often encourage a point of focus with all of the eyes open stuff that I do, so that a person isn't bobbing around inside of their head with their eye accessing, dredging up all sorts of counter examples, questions, whatever. So I'm creating the focus physiologically, remember that point on the hypnotic loop, physiology, very deliberately and very purposefully. I'd also invite you to notice my choice of words. I've said focus intensely, or intently sometimes I'll do, on that spot. I'm also backing that up. When I say intently, I'm using a finger point, okay, a finger point. And you'll notice there's some vigor in that point. There's a sort of rigidity that I put in my arm as I point and emphasize those points. The term intently or intensely is chosen for a reason, because this experience is about lockedness, stuckness, rigidity, stiffness. If I said, just pick a point that you can just focus on in a very relaxed way, that would be incongruent with the experience that we are looking to shape up. So I've chosen focus intently for a reason. If I was doing something that was more relaxation based, I might say pick a point that you can become more fully absorbed in now. Focus intensely, and they're gripping and locking solidly all the way through, just gripping, locking solidly. Okay, so that was a breakdown of some of the psychological subtleties, some of the nuances, some of the differences that make differences that I deploy when I'm doing hypnotic facilitation. If you like this video, please do like the video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe, hit the notifications bell, that way you will get the videos. Make use of the comments section below to continue this conversation. And if you want to check out that 2/3 off discount on the Hypnosis Without Trance online deep apprenticeship, you can find the link above. Okay, until we speak again, keep on using your mind to shape your life.